Hello, small human babies. It is Friday, March 5th, and this is In Case You Missed American History. That's the crowd going wild. It's just me in here, though, so not much of a crowd, but I'm pretty cool. Anyway, if you're watching this, that means you missed class today, and that is okay. I hope you're well. I hope those around you are well, and I hope that I hope that we get some sunshine this weekend so you can figure out a cool way to spend it safe outside. How about that? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to run you through everything that we did today, everything we talked about, and also give you some reminders along the way. So I'm going to actually start with those reminders. So today's Friday. You obviously have Saturday and Sunday off because, well, America. There you go. Remember that Monday is an asynchronous day, meaning that you do not have to log into your class meets at like a set time, but you should check your Google Classrooms early in the day because you might have some tasks to do for some teachers. Make sure you're taking care of those things. For me on Monday, it's going to be finish your World War II work. Okay. Tuesday is also going to be an asynchronous day. The juniors, if you're a junior, you will be here. The juniors are taking the ACT, but the rest of you guys get to, once again, not log into meets, but check Google Classroom to see if there's anything cool happening. I'm going to use Tuesday for you guys in American history as a catch-up day. If you have done everything you need to do, if your World War II work is done, feel free to work for other classes. If you're not done, though, if you owe me a test, if you owe me a quiz, if you owe me an assignment, well, that's how you're going to use your time on Tuesday. Wednesday is going to be the A through L group. Thursday and Friday is going to be the M through Z group. And we are bopping back to 80-minute classes. So the end of the day is going to come at 2:21. It's going to be a little bit of a change, guys. It's going to be, it's going to seem long, but it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. Also, I wanted to remind you guys that the next time that I see you, we're going to have officially 2.5 weeks of class left, only 2.5 weeks. Just make sure that you're taking care of everything you need to take care of. I want you guys to do well. I want you guys to get the most out of this class you can. And I mean, at the basis level, I want you guys to pass. So please make sure you're taking care of the things you need to take care of. Okay. If you have any questions about any of that, please feel free to reach out via chat, via email. You can text me if you want to. Either way, whatever works. Yeah. All right, so here we go. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the Holocaust. Now, I did assign in your World War II work, you do have a 40-minute video from the Holocaust Museum and a writing prompt to go along with that. So you're going to get more information on this, but I want to talk to you guys about this a little bit today first. I guess the first thing I would say is this is not a topic I enjoy teaching about. And it's not because it's not interesting, and it's not because it's not important. It's because it's horrible, and shouldn't have happened. And it's one of the worst things to happen in the history of man, if not the worst thing to ever happen in the history of man. I find it hard to not get angry when I teach about it, to not get sad when I see the pictures. But it's really important because one, it happened. Two, educating yourself about stuff like this is how you make sure stuff like this doesn't happen again, because you can see the signs, you can see it beginning, you can see it starting, you know what has happened before you. And I guess last but not least, there are people out there that don't think it happened. And so arming you with information will give you counter arguments to their belief. Okay. Now, in the past, what I've done is we have an 80-minute class. I show a 45-minute video. The first 30 minutes is really educational. The last 15 minutes gets a little graphic. We process it a little bit. We answer questions and we talk about it. We talk about how it makes people feel. We have a little writing prompt that we do, and then everybody goes on their way. And I do that 3 times in a day, and I go home and go right to bed because I don't want to be around people. But obviously, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm talking to you guys, which right now means I'm kind of talking to myself, which makes this a little weird. So the Holocaust, the word Holocaust with a small h, means to burn something whole or to offer like a sacrifice. In old religions, they used to sacrifice animals and like burn a goat for the whatever. And that is an example of that. But when we change it around and we capitalize it, remember capitalization is important. We go from a sacrifice to the genocide of roughly 6 million European Jews, political opponents of Hitler, prisoners of war, people with cognitive disabilities, people with mental disorders, people who were homosexual, people who were gypsies, but in particular, 6 million Jews from Europe. Now, genocide, for starters, the word. Homicide means to kill like one or a small group. Genocide means that we're going to wipe out an entire group of people. Hitler was trying to erase Jewish people from the planet, basically, because he thought that they were the cause of a lot of the world's issues, including Germany losing World War I, the Great Depression, and he felt and spread this idea that if they wiped out the Jews, that Germany would be a better place and all those problems would end. He's not the first person to suggest that Jewish people were evil. You've got to remember that we live in a world where the majority sets the rules and everybody who lives in a minority is subject to them. That's not fair, but it's the way it's gone historically. And throughout history, Judaism has not been the large dominant religion. And so different groups have victimized them over time. Obviously, Hitler making the most, I'm going to go with egregious, that means worst, the biggest worst, example. While we use the word genocide, Hitler was able to execute, that's probably the right word, 2/3 of Europe's population of Jewish people. Now, he did not get everybody. Some people fled the country and fled the area to England, to the United States, to other places where they'd be safe. Some people were hidden by people that they knew or people that wanted to help. You've got like if you've ever heard of the Diary of Anne Frank, that's kind of the idea in there. Or if you've ever seen Jojo Rabbit, the girl that lives at their house. Regardless, Hitler is able to, with the help of his people, his Nazis, get these things done. Now, if you want to look at anything here and kind of scratch your head, obviously not every German knew what was going on, but some Germans went along with this. Not everybody. Some people realized that if they didn't go along with it, they could be right there in the camps too. Some people obviously agreed with Hitler and thought that this was the right way to go about things. So as I said, there's kind of a historical struggle of Jewish people for equality and fair treatment. But when Hitler comes along, he instantly villainizes the Jewish community in his controlled territories. They have to wear this Yellow Star of David patch. They are subjected to certain rules and things, almost like a bigger, heavier, scarier version of the black codes that we talked about in the American South. Things really kind of get really super bad when a young Jewish teenager assassinates a German diplomat, and Hitler blames pretty much the entire German or Jewish community for this. And so not too long after that, Hitler orders something called Kristallnacht, which basically means Night of the Broken Glass or Night of the Shattered Glass. My German's not so good, so nicht so gut. So I do my best here. In Kristallnacht, Hitler and the Nazis ordered the destruction of Jewish-owned businesses. They shattered the glass, they stole things, they burned them. They went and rounded Jewish people up and stole their property from inside their homes, burned their houses down, burned synagogues. Now, if you're wondering how do they find out that people were Jewish, the synagogues had records and they got a hold of those, and there were other ways they made people register. But after Kristallnacht, Hitler also put this thing out that said that Jewish people couldn't collect insurance money for the damages, that all that money would go to the Nazi party. And so at this point, some Jews voluntarily decide to leave because they realize that they're not safe. Not too long after this, Hitler invades Poland. Poland has a heavy Jewish population, but then he also starts to round up the Jews in those areas and put them in neighborhoods of Polish cities, like, for instance, Warsaw. And they call these areas ghettos. Ghettos are going to be overcrowded areas where these Jews were stuck. While there was violence against them there weren't the gas chambers and the firing squads, but you did have a lot of malnutrition. People were not fed well. They were not getting enough calories. They weren't getting enough variety in their calories. And so the Germans were victimizing these people by holding them captive. The concentration camps, as you guys probably know more, the death camps, began in 1933. When they began, that was originally where Hitler had his political opponents placed, people that spoke out against the Nazi party, people who did not like the way that Hitler was doing things. Eventually, they start taking the Jewish population to those camps. Now, some of the more famous are Dachau and Auschwitz, but there were a number of them all over Germany, Poland, and occupied territories. This gate that you see in this picture up here says Arbeit macht frei. It's like work will set you free or work must set you free. Because when the Jews were brought to the camps, they were forced to work in like weapons factories, making rockets and poison gases and things like that. And so it was like, oh, if it doesn't work and it blows up, oh, it's only killing Jewish people. The camps were run by the SS, or the Schutzstaffel. I think it's Schutzstaffel. That's how you say it. They wore these pins at SS and little skull and crossbones. They were the death squads that ran the camps that oversaw the deaths of all of these people. When Jewish people were moved from the ghettos or rounded up from where they lived, they were placed in railroad cars, which were sealed shut. They were either nailed shut or welded shut. So you could have 100, 200 people inside a railroad car where there wouldn't be enough room to do anything but stand. Elderly people, sick people, babies, all loaded on these same cars. Some people died on those cars. And there were actually cases where they didn't open the car doors. They just let everyone starve to death inside the train car. It's pretty terrible. Now, once you got there, they assigned you your uniform. As you can see, these kids in your striped pajamas, your prison gear. Now you can see these kids are all peeling their sleeves up and showing you their left arm. That's because you would have a prisoner number that you'd have almost like hand tattooed, like a bluish greenish homemade tattoo with your number. So if you ever see a really old, not really old, if you ever see an old person with a pretty not good looking tattoo like that on their arm, they may very well have been a child or very young inside a concentration camp. 1941, the government starts sponsoring what they call the final solution, where they start to actually exterminate the Jews and the other people that are in concentration camps. Some of the more common ways they did it, they had gas chambers where they would tell people they're going to take a shower, and then poison gas would come out of the, I don't want to call them shower heads, but the openings. People would die in there. They wouldn't be able to breathe, and they'd suffocate. The Nazis often filmed those because they were very proud of what they were doing. They did firing squads. They hung people. They burned them alive. They put them out on a cold night and poured water over them so they would get hypothermia and die. They beat people to death. They pushed them off cliffs. They let dogs attack them. So there are cases where they had prisoners fight each other to the death, and the winner got to eat extra food. Obviously, malnutrition. They didn't feed people. They didn't feed them well. And so a lot of people lost drastic amounts of weight until their organs shut down and they died painful, terrible deaths. They got diseases like typhus, which you can get from fleas. That's actually what killed Anne Frank. And just generally, there are cases where they had people dig their own holes and then shot them as they fell into their graves. Women who weren't killed were often sexually assaulted. They were told that if they performed these sex acts, they wouldn't be killed. There's evidence that like Nazi soldiers would rape the women and then put cigarettes out on them and things like that. The conditions were poor. The living situation was poor. You were expected to work, and when you couldn't work anymore, you had no use, and you were executed. If you were an opponent of the Nazis inside the camp, you were executed. Once the Allies show up, they discover these camps, and some of them are abandoned except for the people that were prisoner there, and some of them have the SS people still there. But as we liberate the camps, the American leaders ask that government officials and teachers and church people come overseas to see what's happened so that they can spread the news. News cameras come over and take film footage that become part of newsreels before movies play at movie theaters. The Nazis that were found responsible were put on trial at what were called the Nuremberg Trials. They were found guilty of war crimes, and a lot of them were hung or firing squad executed. Now, before I flip over to my picture slide, I will say this. We did have camps in the United States, not like this, not with gas chambers and dogs and things like that, but we did have what were called internment camps where Japanese Americans were held because people were afraid they were spies or would sabotage things. Those were generally on the West Coast. Those Japanese families were basically had to bring a suitcase and leave all their things behind. Their homes were sold. Their bank accounts were liquidated. That means the money was taken. And although very few people died they called them internment camps, it still is kind of a stain on American history that we were willing to do that to people. Okay. Now our picture slide, and again, some of these are going to be pretty graphic. I apologize, but I feel again like it's something you need to see. Okay. Down in this corner, we have a picture where we have some Nazis with guns, and they're escorting Jewish people out of a building. You can see that there are a lot of children in this picture. Kids were put in camps too. Babies were killed. Kids were killed. They were forced to work dangerous jobs. And this is an example of those people being moved. This is actually a Russian Jew who was forced to dig a grave for he and his family, and then was shot at the edge of his grave. His family had to watch, and they were shot and put into the grave. This is one of the crematoriums you would have found at one of the concentration camps. Often when they gas chambered people, they would then pile the bodies in a crematorium, start the fires, and burn the people. If you look really close, not to be gross, you can actually see a rib cage right here. These two are piles of bodies. This one is a pile of bodies on top of a train car of people. Now you can see based on the thickness of their legs and the way their hip bones that they were malnourished and probably died from a lack of food. When the Allies showed up at these places and found these piles of dead bodies, they made the SS often bury them. But because of the mass numbers, they did mass graves. And so there are places in these concentration camps that have signs that say like 10,000. Sometimes the piles of bodies had been out enough that they were rotting, and they were afraid they were going to make people sick. So in some cases, and I don't like to talk about this, and I hate to see it even more, they actually moved the bodies into these mass graves by using bulldozers, as inhumane as that is. This one over here, these are some American and British and Canadian officers looking at a pile of bodies that had been burned. When the Nazis were being forced out of the camps, sometimes they wanted the evidence destroyed, so they just burned giant piles of bodies. Now, like I said, I do not enjoy talking about this. This is not my favorite day of American history, but it's an important day of American history. As long as there are evil people, they will do evil things. And the question is, why did people let this happen? Why didn't somebody do something? Now, if you're wondering, did we know? No, not until we really got to the camps. But how could people be so evil? How can people be so evil? Watch that video. If you ever get to Washington, D.C., go to the Holocaust Museum. Some of you guys probably should have gone last year with your 8th grade trip, but that didn't happen. It's a quiet place. It's a sad place, but it's an important place. And if you ever get to Germany, some of the old camps are still there, almost as like museums. Yeah. So, well, I hate to leave you like this, but I'm getting a little upset. So have a good weekend. I will see you guys either online or in person on Wednesday. If you have any questions about anything, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help. I'll see you guys soon. Be good. Be well.